You have questions? We have answers. Welcome to the Therapist Question Box with your host, Miss Lindsay Schiss.
Welcome back to another episode of the Therapist Question Box, where we are here to tackle your toughest questions. Today I have with me Kim Millette. Hi, Kim.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate you being here.
I love being here.
Well, today we are going to discuss a topic that affects many people and affects a lot of marriages. And Kim is a therapist at Therapy Utah. She also specializes in couples therapy. And so we'll just get right to the question. And it's a brief question, but it's really direct. So here it is. I just found out that my husband is viewing porn. What do I do? So first of all, I appreciate the bravery and the courage of this listener. I know this is a really painful thing to find that out from a spouse. And so I just want to acknowledge that before we begin. But Kim, as you're hearing that question, that this spouse just found out that their partner has been viewing porn, what would you say is a first step? Like when you hear that?
Well, I too want to say that even though many of us know that this is common, it doesn't make it hurt any less. It doesn't make it less important, or that you shouldn't feel the full effects, or that this is, isn't something that has to be taken care of. And, but the first step is to kind of slow down, because you don't want to react too quickly and be sorry for some of maybe the reactions that you choose to take. And again, we're therapists, and I want to convince you that you might need to get some help on this. So I have a lot of older clients that have been dealing this with their marriage for years. Now, and without exception, they will say to me, I wish we had taken care of this earlier. Whenever there is an unwanted, out of control, problematic use of porn, generally it's going to take help from a professional to fully get it out of the marriage. And what a lot of people don't understand, that there is issues for both the person who's been viewing the pornography, that's having a hard time having to consistently get it out of their lives, and both the other person who has had some impact because of that.
Right.
So both people are going to need some help, therapeutic help. So that's what I would convince you to do that earlier rather than later. One of the reasons is it will be less entrenched the earlier that you get some help.
So I like that you said to slow down. I think when something like this happens, it feels like panic button is going to be pushed. It feels...
Now, you may not want to tell your friends.
Well, and I think that's another thing why this feels so difficult, because people go through it and it's very private, right? You don't want to tell everybody, and you are hoping to maintain the relationship. And so it becomes very private, but also because of that, it feels like silent suffering.
Yes. And so that is too. Traumatically going through something by yourself is traumatic.
Right.
As well.
And here's a question too, before we jump into like therapy or not, is it important to differentiate if a person has viewed one time and stumbled across something versus if they're perpetually viewing pornography?
100%. It also depends on the attitudes and let me put that in a different way. Some people are very dismissive, like this isn't a problem, or why do you care? Everybody does it. That's going to be somebody really different from somebody who's really being genuine and trying to get this out of their lives, right? It's going to be a different process, right? Or there is somebody who the spouse, some people are so afraid to even bring this up to their spouse, is that it's a problem and they're not okay with it. And some people are just criticizing their spouse every day because of it. So again, depending on the personality, how you grew up, your confidence, everything is going to make this a personal process of how we deal with this. Again, another reason why getting some help is going to be a great idea.
Yeah. And it makes sense. It's super personal, and it also is really dependent. It's not one size fits all, right?
Not one size fits all.
Yeah. And when I came to Therapy Utah, one of the first things I would hear is SABT. And what came to my mind when I heard that is I sang in high school and I thought soprano, alto, tenor, bass. But it was a weird way to put it. And I thought that is weird. And it's actual sexual addiction, betrayal, trauma. And it's interesting because I've heard of, before I came to Therapy Utah, I had heard of sexual addiction, but I had never heard of betrayal trauma. And so what you're saying is this is not just a one party issue, right? This is obviously affects both parties, but the idea is that there's therapeutic help for both parties.
Yes. And let me just point out, we're not just trying to take something out. Like as soon as that pornography is gone, then everything is fixed. There has been impact. We want you to have a great relationship in a marriage where you can have intimacy emotionally, spiritually, sexually. We want that for you. And so we're not just also trying to take something away.
Yeah.
And I think the next thing we might need to go to is why pornography, right, can affect marriage in this betrayal trauma kind of way.
Yes. Can we say something first about how, when you said, it is not how it affects marriage, yes, but also understanding why we can't just take something away. I've heard the analogy like you can take that away, but it's, again, the brain gets used to that dopamine hit. So if we're just taking something away and saying, okay, nope, you're no longer can do this, that often doesn't work.
Yes. So first and foremost, when probably somebody has a really habitual use of pornography, that person may even think it's because of a high sex drive. And it really isn't that. It is a coping strategy, okay? So you don't want to take away a coping strategy without having a different coping strategy in place. Otherwise, it won't work because you need to have coping strategies.
When you say it's a coping strategy, I think it's so helpful, especially as a spouse that has felt betrayed because of seeing that their partner is viewing pornography. It feels less personal. It's like,
it feels less personal, but will still hurt.
Listen, hurts 100%. Yes. I'm not trying to minimize that. But what I'm saying is recognizing that it's not because you are not sexy enough or you're not connected enough or you're not whatever, right? But this is a pain point for your partner and they are choosing to use this as a coping mechanism. Does it change how painful it is? No. But an understanding might provide some recognizing like it's a little less personal than it may feel.
Yes. And let's go a little bit around why pornography causes the betrayal trauma. And this isn't like something religious or something. This is research shows that when there's hidden pornography use in the marriage, that causes this betrayal trauma. So let me talk about what that is for just a second. What that means, well, sex is kind of the symbol of fidelity. When you get married, there's this assumed agreement that being faithful is that sexual piece is just between us, right? And so then when you find out that somebody is choosing, and again, that spouse that's not viewing pornography views the other person as choosing to do that, they're choosing to the other person feels devalued. Like you're going somewhere else, you're forgetting me, you're dropping me, right? And that can be just like feels unfaithful. And so good news is that one of the reasons why it causes betrayal trauma is because your spouse really loves you and they're attached to you. And so their whole world gets kind of turned upside down when they feel like you're choosing to go outside of the marriage. Yeah. And so that will so again, when people get into therapy, they go, oh, I know what I've been experiencing. This is betrayal trauma. This is this emotional upheaval. It feels like I'm just preoccupied with this. I can't even function the way I would normally function in my life. And you could take some shame on for that. Like, what's wrong with me? When actually that's just normal. And again, it's also normal for the person who's using pornography to not get that.
Yeah.
And so they can really view things as like it's not as big of a deal as it is. And so they don't, because their intention wasn't to cause that huge impact on their spouse. They don't understand that or value the impact. And so that's all part of this.
That makes sense. But intention versus impact are two separate things. I think that's a really important distinction to make, that the partner often is not intending to make the type of impact it makes, but it is a significant impact.
Yes.
Right? And also, as you were talking, I thought, if this is so upsetting and it feels like, oh my gosh, I can't do my normal activities. Well, congratulations. This sounds like you have an attached bond to your partner. And that's what we're hoping for, right? Like, not congratulations that they're struggling, but actually that's evidence of an attached relationship. So, not that these things are bad, they're actually evidence of pain and betrayal. So, and again, recognizing that it's betrayal. It's not like, and it's trauma. It's not just, oh, my partner has, is viewing pornography or whatever, but it's actually causes trauma on the other partner. So you talked about some underlying reasons that it's maybe it's a coping mechanism. Is there anything else that comes up for you as why a person would choose to turn to pornography?
Really, it is coping. And a lot of times this started like when people were young. I would say in junior high is when you're supposed to learn how to emotionally deal with rejection, right? And sadness and all of these different emotions of not feeling good enough. And hopefully you heal and you have more solid sense of self. But if you turn to pornography to soothe all that pain, you didn't get that emotional maturity. And so some that's still happening. Okay. Still happening. So we sexualize things. So if we don't get those normal sadness and we can't deal with the sadness and the rejection in a really caring way, maybe because for a lot of times for men especially, there isn't an environment where they get to just have their feelings and have the space to have those held well. So those actually get sexualized.
That makes sense.
Okay. And so then, so the coping works, but then it hurts the relationship with yourself because a lot of times people really are acting outside of their own values. And whenever you're not in integrity with yourself, you're hurting the relationship that you have with yourself. And so then you start shaming yourself almost to motivate yourself to stop watching. And so we've got this vicious cycle going over there, right? And then when this comes into the relationship, right, it's hard to deal with the pain that you could be causing. So you want to not deal with it, not see the impact a lot of times, right? But why?
And that doesn't really change anything. When you try to just say, okay, we're not going to deal with it.
Blindness.
Put our, right? Like, put our head in the sand. That's going to go ahead and make it go away. That doesn't do it, right? So,
but even spouses want to have some blindness because they don't want to have this big serious issue, right, in the relationship. So they just hope it can go away quickly and it doesn't. And so then they don't get the help as quickly. I do want to talk about why pornography harms sexuality in general for a second. And it's interesting because the research maybe in the world said, oh, it's not that bad. But now that pornography is so huge and you can see a million videos, we're starting to see how it hurts dopamine in our brains. Mm-hmm. And like if we're just seeking, we get too much dopamine from watching pornography, it affects our motivation for life in general. So when we want good natural dopamine that motivates us to exercise, to keep trying, to take healthy risks. And when you're getting saturated with dopamine using pornography, it actually affects your motivation for life. And you, and pornography is really not, it is not sex, and it is disconnected from your heart. Okay? Yes. And when you're disconnected from your heart and it's all about getting dopamine and getting a hit, you're distanced from your heart, from your own heart, or your relationship with yourself, but also sex becomes disconnected from your heart in your relationship. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why it doesn't work. And women's sexuality is very different. I do a lot of sex therapy with couples, and I know this is very gender and talking about in a gender way, but lots of times people try and use like a man or a woman tries to use your way of being sexual or referring or relating to your sexuality, and you project that's the same for your spouse. Women and men are generally different sexually, and there's not a problem with that. But women need more safety. So when that safety is taken away from porn use, they feel that in a really earth-shattering way. So I've never let people say, well, what if you looked at pornography? What if I did? And the man wouldn't have as many safety issues generally as a woman does.
Yeah,
okay,
that makes sense.
And that's normal. So women also, they kind of, when their sexuality kind of blossoms, they don't figure their sexuality out quite as easily as men do because their parts are all inside. And what sexually turns them on is a lot of times more emotional things. And so in order for their sexuality to blossom, they have to feel like that space to bring their sexuality to is a safe and a good space.
Yeah.
If they feel like I'm having sexuality just to prevent my spouse from looking at pornography, or I don't feel respect in that space, they may even be bringing their sexuality to that space more out of fear, but it doesn't feel good. It's not a place where their true sexuality can really blossom, if that makes sense. And the fantasy part of the erotic part of women is about being the only one. It's about being able to fantasize that, wow, I'm so intoxicating that my spouse just sees me, or my partner just sees me. And so when somebody's looking and choosing to look at pornography in their mind, they can't get that erotic space, right?
Yes.
That helps women be more erotic in their relationships.
That's so interesting. And I would imagine being erotic in a relationship really requires safety.
Yes, for women especially.
Yeah, you feeling like I am the only person. I can be totally myself and I can be open in that way. So how do you rebuild safety? Let's say, again, there's been a breach. There has been an awareness that there has been pornography viewing. How does that work? Where do you even begin?
Let's talk about that for a minute on what she's going to receive in therapy, what he's going to receive in therapy, and what they're going to get together in therapy. So let me talk about what we're going to be really careful of in therapy. So most couples therapy is about a dance or a dynamic, and that means we each have a part to play. And it usually looks something like this. Somebody will bring up the complaint, and usually in maybe a criticizing matter. And the other person can't handle taking that complaint, and they avoid and discount and won't look at that. Well, the more that person doesn't look at that, won't hear that person, this person has to get louder, which often sounds like more criticism. The more criticism, the more avoidance, the more I'm not going to listen to you, which the more I have to get louder. And so a lot of couples therapy is about this dance or the dynamic where each person has a part. But there are certain circumstances in marriage, and in PAC therapy, we just call it unfairness. If something's happening that's really unfair, we can't deal with this in such a collaborative way because we've got to get rid of the unfairness first. So that looks like an affair. It can look like, I've had a client where they're so anxious and the anxiety is taking up so much space in the relationship that's also unfair. And that client is going to have to deal with that anxiety before the relationship can get back to being really collaborative. But even something like cancer could cause that, right? Where there's something so big that it takes away from it being part of each of us. So you don't want to get into regular couples therapy where it would be treated, the porn use is treated like, we have different parenting styles, or somebody's not picking up their stuff, or you have problems too. Just because I have this problem, you do too, right? So when you minimize that harm, or try and equalize it, that's what, one of these unfairness things, that's where you can cause the most harm and you can get some stuckness. Because we really do have to do what I call contain this as an issue that we're dealing with. And again, if I have a gambling addiction, and I'm doing that, I have to deal with that so that we can get back to this collaborative place in the marriage. So which is part of doing that kind of couples therapy. If you go to couples therapy and they're treating this like a couples issue problem, or equalizing that, then you know that you're not in a great space. Yeah. So just be aware of that. But then what is he going to get in therapy?
Can I stop really quickly?
Yep.
This is why it's really, as you're talking, I think this is the value of going to therapy, because how easy can we get distracted in we can go on the side tangents, right? About, well, you did this and it gets louder, so I complain more and then I avoid more. And we get into this cycle Whereas a therapist can say, wait a minute, I can see what's going on. I can see where this cycle is happening. She's feeling unheard. He's feeling unsafe. So we're continuing in this cycle. So I can see how valuable having that third party, that objective third party is in a situation like this. Okay. So you talked about what she...
Yes. I just want to say too, if you understand that, oh, this really is unfairness, then you feel more empowered to go seek help and require your spouse to get the help, right? You can have that boundary of like, look, this doesn't work for me in the marriage. I need us to go get some professional help. And that would be with any kind of unfairness, right? Any big thing that you can tell, hey, we're not going to deal with this on our own. So sometimes just knowing, hey, this is one of those things that you can require and require your spouse to get some help.
When you say that, it's like, yes, a boundary around it. Like, this is a boundary that I will not continue in this relationship until we can get some help. I mean, that sounds harsh. However, that makes a lot of sense.
And you're doing it for the relationship, right? You want this out so that you can get that good stuff back.
And the safety back, right? Yes. It's not about controlling the partner, but it's about safety and it's about the relationship.
Yes. And you just said something else that's important. And we've gone through the history in dealing with pornography issues and unfaithfulness where we've done things really separate. We're now evolved enough in the therapeutic profession to know that this has to be a partner-sensitive recovery. So in other words, he's not just going to go like, this is his problem, he needs to take care of it, right? Or this is my problem, don't get into my problem, right? That doesn't work. But it doesn't work when somebody's trying to control it. Mm-hmm. That's what we call it kind of partner-sensitive recovery, where he's going to go to some recovery and he's got to learn what I do, some internal work and some external work. Mm-hmm. So the internal work looks like getting to the root of why this is a coping strategy with you, getting to the root of why. Stop thinking that this is about high sex drive, okay? Plus, you're going to have to do some external work, which looks like, hey, what is this behavior pattern and how am I going to do things externally, behaviors differently? So there's internal work, external work, and then there's this relational work. This really does impact your relationship. And as hard as it is to see that it does because it causes so much pain, right? You're going to have to deal with the relational impact. And we always have to do shame work. So in other words, people think that they can help the relationship with themselves after they get porn out of the relationship. But it's not true. It takes a healthy person to heal. So we have to start working on that healthy relationship with yourself before you can actually get or while you're trying to get that pornography out. You can't be shaming yourself better. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And a lot of people go that route, right? Mm-hmm. And what does shame do? It starts that whole cycle over again.
Yeah, that's part of the reasons why you're staying in that same cycle. But it feels like that's what you should do.
Right. However, when you were saying that, you were saying, it's getting to the root of the problem. What comes up in my mind is that might require some trauma work, actually.
It does. It does. But you may first have to start a little bit more simple of just finding what we'd call off ramps, like just simple things like going to bed at the same time as your partner. Those are the behaviors that we're talking about. Maybe putting some filters on. Maybe, getting in a group. So there's first some things that we're going to do maybe behavior wise so that you're almost set up to be doing okay. And then when you're starting to get a little bit of success, then you're going to do that internal work. And like we said, you're going to get some good coping strategies so that when this is gone, you're not left flailing with no coping strategies.
Right, right. Now, for the partner, so this is, what you were just saying is for the person who's viewing the pornography. Mm-hmm. For the partner, I can see a couple of things happening. The partner potentially disengaging. Like, I am giving you the cold shoulder. This is no longer safe. I am not engaging. Or getting hyper anxious and trying to watch everything they're doing and to really police their behavior. And neither one of those seem like a good approach for having personal peace for the partner.
Yes.
So what does that look like for a partner to say, okay, I'm not going to bury my head in the sand, but I'm not going to be a policeman and manage all of your online viewing, because that also sounds horrible. And I also don't want to just push you away and hate you for the rest of my life. Like, what does that look like in reality on a day-to-day basis?
It's just what you're saying, where it's this middle ground and it's just learning some boundaries. So, but first, if my partner, the partner who's in recovery, is sharing their recovery in this genuine way, it actually makes the other person feel safer because they go, oh, wow, they're addressing it. And they understand how they're doing it. So when I get caught in my betrayal trauma and I get in that fight, flight, worry place, I can settle myself down because I know what's going on with my partner. If I completely don't know, I have no way to settle down. And if I can't settle down, I can't work on my own stuff.
And this is where individual therapy comes into play for the partner who has seen that this has happened. Their partner is viewing pornography. They're the betrayed partner, I'll call them. Is that learning coping skills, learning skills that they can figure how to get back into a state of, okay, I'm okay. I'm not panicking. I'm not in fight or flight, but I'm okay.
Yes. So you do have to get that safety in your body. So you'll learn that. So as the betrayed person, you're going to learn some things. Now, some people, I have a couple and they thought, oh, when she's learning about her sexuality and how to show up better sexually. No, she's not doing that. Okay. Or he's not doing that. And they're actually, first, when somebody has used pornography, that person has taken a hit to their personal feelings of value. They've been devalued. So they are going to be strengthening their sense of value, strengthening who they are, that they aren't the cause of that kind of thing. So that's going to be one of their first things. Another thing is usually that person has gone through a lot of what we call gaslighting. They've been told you're the issue, or they've had lies. No, it's not going on. And they find out what it is. And they've had so much of this being told one thing and feeling another thing, they lose trust in themselves.
Yep.
And so they are going to be dealing with getting that reality back and that trust back because of that part of whatever lying or gaslighting has been taken care of. So they're going to be doing that. And then, yes, they're going to be doing that regulation stuff that we've talked about. When you learn how to have a good boundary, and this takes a process, you're protecting that part of you. And then you can show up in other ways. So you're deciding, this is the way I can't show up because I don't feel valued. That might be full sexuality. I'm not showing up. Or it might be, I'm going to show up sexually when this and this and this is happening, right? Maybe, you're proactive in your recovery. We felt connected. I can tell, partners can tell when sex is connecting and when it's not, when it's coming from the heart and when it's not. So they can have some confidence in their ability to choose where they don't want to show up. And in doing that, then they know where they do want to show up, right? They don't have to show up everywhere like they're scared or everywhere protecting themselves. And they can make those decisions on their own. So that's the type of work that they are doing in their individual therapy.
And, as you're saying that, I keep thinking that the partner does not lose a sense of self. Like that their own ability to trust themselves, their ability to find safety in their own body, like to feel like, okay, I know I'm not okay right now. I know some things to do to get me back into a place where I'm feeling more normal. I'm not feeling like I'm panicking or I just want to hide under my covers. But that they start trusting themselves again, right? That they're able to have meaningful connections outside of the marriage, right? So, Kim, I want to just make sure, is there anything as we are concluding that you want to make sure to offer this listener, anything that you feel like is important that we haven't talked about?
Sure. Last thing is there is some work to do with couples. It won't look like that normal couples where we could actually accidentally blame the person for their own betrayal as if they caused it. Does that make sense? That's bad couples work. But there's still, when people are hurt, they show up hurt everywhere, right? So in parenting, in finances, a couple still might need some help because while they're navigating this issue, they're going to need help maybe with those other issues. And so it's appropriate to have some couples work still happening. We just have to treat that really sensitively in how we do that.
So can I just say something really quickly, a question about that? So I'm hearing individual therapy for the man, individual therapy for the woman, couples therapy for both of them. That is significant time and money. So I'm obviously a believer in it, but let's say that's not realistic for this listener or our listeners right now. what's a step they can take? What would that look like? Like, what would be the most important?
I would hope that your therapist would introduce both people to great books.
Yeah.
Okay. You can do so much with great books, right? And if you'll do that good work in between sessions, it makes all the difference. Okay. So say you don't get couples very much, maybe once a month or something like that. And again, every couple is going to be really different with this, right? And again, some people can't, well, I don't want to start a whole new topic, but, the other thing I want you to say is you're worth it, and divorce costs a lot of money.
It's true.
You're right. It really costs a lot of money, and we have to be, I could have overwhelmed you, just like you said, oh, that's overwhelming, right? I could have overwhelmed you, but really it's like we do not heal by pushing things under the rug. I will get couples sometimes who've already dealt with, maybe the pornography is already out of the marriage, but just in introducing, I can tell that work's not done. For instance, I'll get a couple together and the partner who has viewed can just say it in such this insensitive way while the other partner's there. And I can tell, oop, we haven't done our work, because you can still say that as if there hasn't been an impact on your spouse, even though they've stopped using. And I can tell there's still some work to do there, right? And so, the work, it doesn't work. It'll come back up. If you don't heal this well, it's under the rug and you'll trip over it all the time as you're trying to put your relationship back together. And so, and part of this work and doing it well, actually, guess what? It actually causes intimacy.
Isn't that ironic?
Yes.
Even though it was started as a breach.
Being able to talk about the pain and where the pain is held well. Wow. A person using pornography can no longer use pornography in that escape mode, because that's usually what they're doing. They're escaping. But if they know how much this really pains the person that they love, they don't go into that escape mode so easily, right? And they figure things out quicker, right? And if the woman can really share her pain and that's heard, and he's really empathetic and understanding of that, it actually heals. And she doesn't stay in her betrayal trauma. So it's important.
It's really important. You know, as you were talking, I thought about a couple of things. One is a book that I think is an excellent reference, which is The Betrayal Bind. I don't know if you have any others, but we can link that in the show notes, but that are really beneficial and really validating to a partner when they have felt and when there's been betrayal. The other thing is, another option in addition to individual therapy is group therapy. I know there has been a lot of research about how important having support outside of your spouse is, and group therapy can be a really powerful.
Yeah, it's usually less expensive, and because shame is such a big part of either for either party. So shame can be a big part, knowing you feel so terrible that you may have this issue with porn. And when you get in a group and you see, look at all these good guys, I can see that they have this issue too, then you can get out of some shame. They can also help you see, like you'll see their blind spots, and it makes you wonder if you have a blind spot, right? And the same thing with the person who's been betrayed. They can say, oh, I'm not the only person. Look how that person's betrayed too. And look how nice and totally great they are, right? So it must not just be, like just me. Feeling alone in the world is the worst,
Absolutely.
Right? And so the groups do help with that. Another book suggestion. This one just came out this year, and it's a new favorite. And if people know me, it's instead of a cat lady, I'm a book lady.
Yes, you are. It's okay. I am too.
And this one is called The Sex Talk You Never Got. And it's to heal masculine sexuality, but I think it's great for both people to read. But it gives you the process of how to heal that sexuality. And so it's a great book.
Okay. So The Betrayal Bind, The Sex Talk You Never Got.
Yep.
Really,
there's way more, but
there are.
Those
yes,
are two
for
favorites.
sure. So to go through a couple of the nuggets that we talked about is really, if this happens to you, to slow down, to recognize that the pain, the betrayal that has been felt is normal, and to not jump to any decisions, to do what you can to try to get back to a state of regulation, emotional regulation,
But don't go into blindness.
Right. That's not the
looks
goal.
like this is going to go away by itself.
No, but when something big happens like this, it's like, I got to fire. We got to do something. We got to do something. And it's like, wait a minute. Let's just take a beat, take some breaths, and let's just take some time to get back to like, okay, because again, betrayal is significant and it's painful. So again, slowing things down. I also thought it was really important to recognize that often it is a coping strategy, that this is not about sexuality. This is not hypersexuality, but this is a coping mechanism that has been utilized, right? And understanding that therapy is really important, not just for the person that is viewing pornography, but for the partner of the person viewing pornography. And that there's going to be work that needs to be done on both sides. And that couples therapy is also really valuable to help understand what is going on with each partner. And that also group therapy is an option as well. And to not go at this alone. I mean, that's what I keep hearing and thinking, that you cannot do this alone. It is too painful. It is too big. And it's also often really private. Right? So it feels very lonely when you're going through this for many people, because they are not reaching out to people and telling their best friend and their mothers or whatever what's going on, because they're trying to preserve the relationship. So they need to seek support outside of their circle of influence, right? So Kim, really appreciate your time and your insights. Recognizing that finding out that a spouse is viewing pornography is extremely painful, but it is a problem that can be solved with hard work, with resources. It can be something that actually, what you said, can bring a couple closer together. So remember, if you have questions, go to our show notes or go to the Therapy Utah website. No question is off limits. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, take care.